What's up, guys? It is Thomas Mott, Josh Davis hopping on here. Obviously, I have some bigger news, and Thomas, this is surprising because normally I feel like we've been talking a lot of times like, hey, there's like expectations or the regular streams that we have and everything else. But for the first
Sure.
time in a while, we have some breaking news. So wanted to hop on here, talk to you guys first, and I'll just go ahead and throw it up here on the page. We're gonna get into it, but Devin White officially, everybody saw the title and everything else there, but Devin White officially released by the Eagles and announced 20 minutes ago or so. But immediate takeaways, thoughts there. I know some other analysis we have, but thoughts on that.
I mean, it's not a surprise. We kind of felt like this was coming. And there's a report, obviously, with this release saying the Eagles were trying to trade Devin White, but they went ahead and made a financial deal with him to kind of essentially restructure his contract the way they could release him before the trade deadline, the way he wouldn't hit waivers, the way he'd go sign freely with anybody and be free a lot sooner than waiting for the trade deadline on November, 5th, 7th, whatever the day is.
Hmm.
So they've been working on this for a long time. They have finally come to a deal. That part is not really a surprise. The surprise, Josh, is how big of a failure this free agent addition was. I mean, this was supposed to be your starting middle linebacker and was your starting middle linebacker all throughout training camp into the preseason. And then suddenly, a couple days before we actually got started with week one, heading down to Brazil, he has an ankle injury, which who knows if that was ever actually the case. Zack Baun plays well, Nakobe Dean plays well, and he basically sat the remainder of the season. It's just amazing that we got to this point after he played all of training camp. Because if he was the backup all training camp long, it means he wasn't good enough. But clearly he was good enough for the majority of training camp. And then they just decided, hey, we don't want to use you anymore. Not a special teams player. Hard to have him active on any sort of given roster day. The rest is history. And the Eagles have missed on another free agent linebacker, adding to the course of history, which has been pretty disappointing.
It really has, yes. And you hit the nail on the head there. I miss on another linebacker. You talk about what we heard from Devin White. Everyone remembers like the interview he did with a Pivot podcast, and
Yep.
hey, he's going to be here. He's going to be the linebacker that the Eagles had not had, in previous years, and all this. He's like, hey, no disrespect, but like that's what I'm hoping to be. It's my career. Turn this thing around. Resonated with Howie Roseman, and yet that's not what you're seeing, obviously, because of the release, like you mentioned there, and Howie trying to salvage anything he possibly can before the
Yeah.
trade deadline. But, people see, hey, Nakobe Dean right there, Zack Baun. I mean, those two are the guys that naturally won out the job, so to speak. But at the same time, when they initially made that move of $8 million, I know it's with the guaranteed, I guess, of the 3.5, I believe, whenever they first signed him. But
Yeah.
still, it's like, there was a lot of hope, or there was a decent amount of hope, and yet you didn't even see him play a snap on a regular season game. So I don't necessarily know because, yeah, we talk about and speculate. Sure, Devin White had not played near to the standard, certainly the all-pro type of level that he had been years ago. But it's one thing to be like, okay, preseason, not so great in very limited snaps, but to hear reports of him continuing to get first-team reps and then
Yeah.
nothing coming from it. So that, to me, is the most just weird, strange, odd, however you want to phrase that thing of what actually happened and took place here. Yet, obviously they feel well enough to just move on and say, okay, we don't need you. Whether it's because Howie Roseman, and give him some credit, he tries to do right by players. So maybe it's you know what, look,
Sure.
this is just not going to work out. So we're going to try to take care of ourselves here, yes, but also allow you to potentially find a place to play. But it just doesn't completely make sense when you look at what happened previously. Now you fast forward to here, and you didn't even see him play a single regular season snap.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think there's definitely something more to this. If I had to guess, and again, we have no inside information, no one really knows right now. The Eagles originally promised him the starting linebacker role because they thought that Nakobe Dean wasn't going to be that great. Zack Baun was very much a project. The guy was a pass rusher, an edge rusher,
Hmm.
essentially, an outside linebacker, basically playing on special teams his entire career before coming to Philadelphia. And then probably over the course of training camp, they realized Baun and Dean both were playing a lot better. Whether the ankle injury for White at the beginning of the season, Josh, was true or not, let's say it was. That gave you an opportunity to see full up in a game against the Packers where Zack Baun had a bunch of tackles and Nakobe Dean looked really good. And they went, hey, you've lost your starting job. You're going to be a backup. And my guess is White didn't take it well. And I wouldn't either. If I was promised, took less money, like we just talked about, to come to Philadelphia to be the guy, and now I'm no longer the guy at 26 years old trying to restart my career, get that final big contract extension after this season, he was probably upset. And once he
For
became
sure.
healthy, the Eagles decided, hey, there's no point in playing this guy. He already doesn't like the situation that he's in. we're going to roll with Baun and Dean and see if they can actually work out. And the rest is probably history. And I will say, Josh, they probably feel fine with Jeremiah Trotter Jr. to the point that if Baun or Dean were to actually be hurt, they'd be okay with either him or Ben Van Sumeren as a backup. And then you get to the point where save a little bit of money in terms of cutting him, right? They made a mutually beneficial deal to save Philadelphia some money, according to the report. Get him
Mhm.
out of here, let him start fresh, and you move on from the whole Devin White situation inside the Eagles locker room.
Right. And as you said, just for those, I'm seeing a couple comments joining late here at this point, but official, the Eagles
It's
have cut
official.
Devin White. So
Yep.
that is the situation going on. Obviously, talking about potential ramifications or what that means, everything else. Got to get to the super chat here real quick. Flipping the Bird 85, appreciate that. Said, I hate how this organization operates the past couple seasons. Absolutely no information on the reasons why these decisions happen. Watch, they
Point.
won't address it at all, like it never happened.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it'll
Well.
be interesting because we're going to get a press conference tomorrow, and so you could guarantee the first
Mhm.
question asked will be, "What happened with Devin White?" Like something. Now, is Sirianni going to give us a word salad? Probably so. So, flip
One
the
hundred
bird. You're
percent.
probably right on that one. But it would be interesting if every once in a while we do get some behind the scenes reports, some scoops, or maybe rumors. And where there's smoke, there's fire. So when we talked about previously, well before, this is not as shocking of a, hey, he's completely, or he wasn't going to get playing time, but the part of like, okay, what was he going to get traded?
Yeah.
Maybe we're hearing rumors there, but the Eagles not saying a whole lot. It's a little bit strange from that front, but still, you kind of see things of, okay, it's not exactly what they're all telling us. I mean, case in point, we can look at the Jets. We're not getting into that, but Robert Saleh, Aaron Rodgers, all that going on, and then you see he gets fired. So you see things, and you're like, okay, maybe there's something here. And yet I saw a couple comments as well saying the same thing about, a little bit different story, but Miles Jack, you have a linebacker come in, leaves very quickly, and then ends up getting on with another team later of saying, well, I wanted to retire, but not exactly really. So I don't know if it's necessarily the Eagles linebacker room or if it's just a one-off instance here with Devin White, but something, obviously did not play out as they expected. And, therefore Devin White is moving on. Question, I guess, and people mentioning it as well because we didn't get to see it, right? And we talk about Nakobe Dean had a positive game. What the first game with Zack Baun? I think we were a little bit,
Yeah.
overall, we would say it was solid. It wasn't up to Zack Baun level, but it's been very spotty at best. I think beyond that point, and that might be a little bit complimentary, but still the thought that everyone's been saying, especially after the Bucks game, is like it can't be worse than that. Like the 5 missed tackles went to
Yeah.
Kobe Dean. So I think that is the most surprising part to me to say, wait, you're not even going to let him get a chance on the field because if Nakobe Dean was playing at a Pro Bowl level or even heck just a starter level, then yeah, it'd be one thing. But you just came away from that side and he got 5 missed tackles. So does this say anything to you as far as a Jeremiah Trotter, Ben Van Sumer? I know you mentioned them a little bit, but anything for their potential role, or is it? I mean, do you anticipate Vic Fangio saying like, "Nah, this is my guy. We're gonna go to Kobe Dean"?
Well, I think they're rolling with them, and I do think Howie has, whether it's Howie or someone else in that front office or it's the coaching staff, they have a soft spot in their heart for Nakobe Dean. They think
Hmm.
Nakobe Dean can be a star linebacker in this league. I mean, go back to when we were drafted, whenever he was drafted in the third round, all we talked about was the Eagles fleeced the entire NFL. Dean was supposed to go top 20. I mean, draft night, it was like, okay, waiting for Dean. Didn't go first night. And then late on night two, he goes in the third round and we fleeced everybody. And he's never lived up to the hype, right? And he's had moments, he flashes, but overall, he's not great in coverage. And really, the main problem we saw in the Bucks game, tackling in open space can be a problem. He's a little bit
Jeez, yeah.
undersized to be a middle linebacker. I always thought when you signed Devin White, you had the size you'd want at middle linebacker, and Dean could play outside linebacker because he's faster, he's quicker. He's not necessarily, again, a great coverage quick linebacker, but he is fast enough to be kind of the outside guy, moving laterally left to right instead of coming straight downhill to fill gaps and pick up, blocking tight ends and stuff like that. And yet they decided that Devin White wasn't the guy. And so I do think we have to be clear that Devin White was not going to be 2020 Devin White when he won a Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs. That seemed very obvious, but we just don't know how good he could have been. What if he was 85% of his Pro Bowl caliber year when he won a Super Bowl with the Chiefs and alongside Levante David, excuse me, they
Hmm.
were the best linebacker tandem in the National Football League. 85% of that would be the best linebacker Philadelphia's had in a very long time. There just got to be something a little more behind the scenes that rubbed the Eagles front office the wrong way. I think Devin White, again, was probably promised a starting job. had the starting job and got the rug pulled out from under him very quickly and picked him off probably. And honestly, I'd be feeling the exact same way. So I don't think it's actually going to go ahead and matter in terms of what happens with the Eagles on Sunday or going forward. I think their linebacker core we just mentioned is set, Josh. But it does continue this narrative that Howie Roseman can't figure out the linebacker spot. I mean, truly, his one linebacker hit
Seriously.
was TJ Edwards, and didn't want to sign him for like $7 million a year. It seems like one of the biggest mistakes in recent Eagle franchise history. And we're going to have to continue to live with the fact that we don't have an elite linebacker. And whether Devin White was going to be that or not, we're never going to know going forward.
We won't. And maybe, hopefully, if Zack Baun can continue to pan out here, the one thing that we continue to say is if that does happen, though, to please lock him up and to actually get some sort of deal done. Because you're right. Like, we've seen it time and time again now. And linebacker's the one spot where, there's a couple, but definitely with the linebacker going, does he value it enough? Is he going to pay the right guy? Is he going to make the move when it's necessary to get that linebacker position filled? And so far, we're continuing to see it's kind of the same common denominator, the same situation popping up. I see several comments of people saying, Desert Eagle, this was a huge mistake. On the flip side, there's other people saying like, hey, Devin White was not that great anyway. Understandably so. You said it as well. Like, look, he was not going to be to that all-pro level. But what we saw from Nakobe Dean, it was an incredibly low floor. Like we're not talking about like to go in there and even give him a little bit of a chance when a player is at the top of their game, or we're talking about one of the top starters in the league. We are looking at a guy who missed 5 tackles against the Bucs, and that's not like a one-off scenario either. Like if it had been everyone had a terrible game, hot weather, everyone was like not in good shape or whatever, like sick. That's one thing. But we had seen it a number of times, and this Vic Fangio defense in particular is going to ask a lot of players specifically in those situations. And Devin White, sure, he might have been thrown out there and missed a lot of tackles. And if that was the case, oh well. But I don't know. For my own individual peace of mind, I personally would have preferred to at least see him out there for one game before we go, let's just go ahead and cut him. Like, it's not going to work. But we don't know that because we'll never know. We'll never see him out there. So I don't know. It's kind of strange. Appreciate everybody hanging out. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe as always, as we are, usually and always first to go live for any breaking news like this. Kind of crazy. And people saying, like Kaiser White to the Cardinals. There's another mention. I mean, even for his element, what he's done. Van Ginkel, Minnesota, that would have been phenomenal if you could have signed him. Not that he was in Eagles, but that was one of those names thrown out there. Yes, Jordan Hicks as well. It almost seems like as soon as someone takes off from the lab, like what's going to happen, this, but what's going to happen is Devin White is going to get signed by whoever, name a team, and he's going to play at a solid level. I'm not going to say dominant. I'm not going to say Pro Bowl, but he will play at a solid level, and we'll look back and go, okay, well, there you go.
There you go.
Once again,
they can't figure it out. I mean, Bobby Wagner was a free agent in this year's free agent class, and everyone said he was too old. And Bobby Wagner is the anchor of the Commanders' defense. He's an absolute leader on a young football team and looks fantastic. And he was probably signed, I don't know the exact number, but for very similar money, maybe a little bit more than Devin White. We just continue to miss on linebackers, and we pay the price. We got a super chat here from Joey. He says, are our linebackers and secondary bad, or is our D-line getting zero pressure right now? This opens a spot for a star pass rusher. We have 11 million cap space room currently. What do you think? Who do you think we would get at edge? Crosby. A lot of questions there. I do think that the D-line is the problem right now, right? If your defensive line was not a problem, it helps out the linebackers. The secondary is obviously struggling, especially in the slot with Avonte Maddox. But overall, the secondary has not been terrible. They're bad against the Bucs, but pretty good the rest of the way. Mm-hmm. It does open up a spot technically, although you're bringing back Anais Smith from the from IR. You're bringing back Sidney Brown from the from IR, and so those two players are going to take up roster spots. Do they go out and get a star pass rusher? I don't know. I mean, you would have to get a team that's selling like the Raiders or the Browns, but I mean, the Raiders are only 2-3. It seems a little early to sell everybody. I think the Browns make more sense. We talked about this on a show, I think Sunday, whenever we were talking about when we were doing Sunday Night Football.
Yep.
The Browns might want to bench Deshaun Watson if they get killed by Philadelphia. Knock on wood. Hopefully that happens.
They might want to bench him already. And then if they bench Deshaun Watson, they got to cut him. They got to eat a lot of cap space. They got to sell everybody. And then you go Myles Garrett. But again, that's like a very extremely, 0.01% chance of happening. So I think the roster you have is what you're going to get unless we start winning games and approach the trade deadline, and then Howie decides to plug a hole. I don't think Howie's convinced this roster and this team
is Super Bowl or bust anymore after the start. You have to
Mhm.
get back to proving that that's the case before you go out and make a move like they've done basically every year since 2017 at the NFL trade deadline.
I wouldn't be either. I mean, I agree with that standpoint. Like Lewis says here, appreciate the two. Said Eagles burned 5 million on White and 50+ million on Huff. Shaking my
Big
head.
misses. Big
It's
misses.
for sure at the moment. Absolutely,
Yep.
maybe they could turn around. Not with White naturally because he's gone, but Bryce Huff,
Yep.
maybe. But either way, you're locked in basically till 2026. Like if you thought, oh, let's try to trade or
Nope.
release or something, like
Nope.
2026 is you're bought in. Bryce Huff, a hopefully we're not saying one hit wonder, but so far signs are showing that it's like, my gosh, you're not using him in the correct way, sure.
Yeah.
But also, if you go back and look at, I talked about on the show today, is like you go back and look at the numbers and the reason why he was so productive, you could make the argument, you could make the case that the vast majority of his sacks came on 3rd and 6 or longer,
Good
late
point.
in the second half against a tired offensive line when it was a pass only situation, because,
Yeah.
obviously he was a pass rusher situationally. So, was he actually going up against the better teams and the better offensive linemen in not as great situations to rush the passer? I mean, we're seeing so far it has not looked great. And yes, he's had to learn the extra facet of trying to stop the run, set the edge, all
Yeah.
this other stuff. But yeah, I mean, Lewis is right. You're burning money at this point. They need to prove it from the player's standpoint. Howie as well for some of the moves, and we give him credit for the great moves that he's made. But at the same time, I mean, we hold him accountable of like, look, recently it's not looking near as great as it has for some of the moves. So I don't think that's to say he's not out there looking, but the recent ones, you're kind of like your hands are somewhat tied with some of these moves you already made.
Those free agent additions on defense this year is going to be probably a blight on Howie Roseman's record. Now, he's had plenty of misses. Most GMs with his sort of tenure, many, many years in the NFL do. And for as great as he's been on offense, Saquon Barkley is a mega hit. Bryce Huff has been a bust. Now Devin White is the ultimate bust. He's not even going to play for you now. You're basically just paying him to do nothing and then cutting him and cutting your losses at that point. CJ Gardner-Johnson, to this point, hasn't been great. Giving up 4 passing touchdowns. His coverage rate has been really, really bad. It's not 2022 CJ Gardner-Johnson to this point. Again, we'll see. Hopefully that'll be proved wrong. And Zack Baun, I mean, he's probably your best free agent addition, maybe a little diamond in the rough, but you're paying him pennies on the dollar. And it's not like he's changed your defense. He's just filled a hole that you desperately needed and has been up and down through 4 games, right? Zack Baun
Hmm.
has not come in here and turned into a Pro Bowl caliber linebacker. He's been consistently getting tackles, but he definitely is not. He wasn't the difference maker in the Eagles getting blown against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? He was one of the ones missing a lot of those tackles.
Right.
So Howie's missed. I mean, this is what happens, right? This is why your defense seemingly is worse than your offense right now, because the offense is about to be healthy. They should be fine.
Hmm.
You missed on a free agent additions. The edge rusher is a giant question mark, probably the biggest question mark on this team. Now you lose another linebacker. Safety isn't working out that great, and your one decent addition is really kind of a forgotten, low risk, high reward sort of player.
Yep, yep. And again, we're not knocking because you mentioned the offensive players, and some people say, "Hey, mention Saquon Barkley, Mekhi Becton."
He still
You're not
hits.
knocking
Yeah,
play like there are some
yeah.
hits, but still, as you say, with the defensive side, that's where he's being measured. And flipping the bird, by the way, did not miss the super chat. We're just slowly getting through the other one, so appreciate the other 5. Said they need to cut Maddox next. They need to cut Maddox next. Start Cooper DeJean at slot corner.
Mm.
Bench Slay for 2 games to humble him, and start
Ha!
Isaiah Rodgers opposite of Q. So there's a lot of moves
There you
there
go.
within the defense.
That's funny.
I don't totally knock several of those, I will say. As far as Cooper DeJean, getting him in action
For sure.
any way you
For sure.
can, as soon as he's ready, even if he's partially ready, we could probably say go ahead and throw him out there as far as just tackling athleticism. You drafted him for a reason.
Yep.
Set a
I agree.
message for the team. If it's even just bench for the opening series for Slay,
Ha!
I think you're not going to see that.
That'd
But
be
I'm just
pretty
saying
dramatic.
to send a message
Sure.
to the team, you could say, hey guys,
Sure.
look, we're done with it. We're not going to tolerate. But ultimately, this goes into, I guess, the larger story or portion of what does the defense do? What does the offense do? Making changes out of the bye. They felt like this was necessary with Devin White and cutting him. But regardless, I mean, this is going to be a game coming up against the Cleveland Browns that is Nick Sirianni's job. Like the Browns have been so bad and they have looked so atrocious that I don't care whether it's Deshaun Watson. I don't care whether it's Jameis Winston, whoever it
Yep.
is there. If the Eagles lose this game, because remember, we've both talked about it. You had it on your show yesterday, but like A.J. Brown and Smitty coming back,
Yep.
good news there. The offense should turn things around. there's no excuses. There is absolutely no
0.
excuses to go out and lay an egg against Cleveland. So if that
Well,
happens, I don't know. There's no way. There's no way you survive through that.
well, and we talked about how, early bye week helps people get healthy. It comes at the perfect time for Philadelphia. But I do think that a week 10 bye week would have hurt the Eagles right now, especially with their slow start. Remember
Yeah,
last year, they had a fast start. They were probably, glossing over a lot of the flaws that would come up to them in the end because they kept winning. It was like, we're just going to win this way and keep moving on. This year with the early bye and the poor play at times, plus not being fully out of it, if you were 1-4, it'd feel a lot different. They probably have had a really good opportunity to reset this entire 2 weeks off. I mean, the Eagles have had a long time. 2 weeks is a long time in the middle of the NFL season. And the hope is, you just mentioned it, that this Devin White release is was number 5 on a list of things that they really wanted to do and go through over the course of the bye week, which will include scheme changes, hopefully personnel changes. I'll be shocked if Vontae Maddox is the starting nickel when they play the Browns on Sunday
good gosh.
afternoon. Releasing Devin White, potentially, locker room issues, get him out of there. I think that they're sending a message that they're trying to go ahead and make sure that this season does not unravel in the way that it potentially could. If you lose to the Browns, you mentioned it, it could get ugly fast. Look what the Jets just did with Robert Saleh. You talked about it on your show today. 2-3, when the expectation is Super Bowl, it's not going to cut it. And if your quarterback and your players don't really like him, that was the rumor, at least from an Aaron Rodgers perspective, you're going to go. And the same can be said about Nick Sirianni. But the first domino that we thought was basically going to happen eventually was Devin White was going to be let go. It did. It's crazy how much you paid him to basically do nothing and never really give him a shot. But we have to trust, Josh, that even our coaching staff, which has a lot of question marks right now, especially at the top, knows more than we do. They were with him every single day. They watched every snap at training camp and the
Mhm.
preseason, and they truly believe that he was not worth putting on the football field ahead of Nakobe Dean and Zack Baun. And if that's the case, then they're probably right. We'll have to move on from this.
It's hard. It's hard to do that. I hear what you're. It is hard to do that, to trust the coaching staff whenever we're talking about a group that is,
Yeah.
just what we've seen. But they are with him every day, and yes, it's just reading from reports that we get, or very small glimpses from practice, or even open practice and things like
Yeah.
that. But man, I mean, with the common denominator of what we continue to see, it is hard to fully fathom and come to terms with that.
Yep.
Philly Sports Wraps here with a 2 said how he went from great to what you doing. So it's
That's
it's
the life of a GM, though,
it
Josh.
is.
It
It
really
is.
is.
It's a what
It
have you done
really
for me
is.
lately? It's a recency
Yeah.
bias. Have you hit immediately? Because it's very quick where we can all of a sudden go like, oh my gosh, he's terrible, right? Or if you go
Mhm.
back to other picks and other acquisitions and moves and things like that, sure. But as great as, try to be as realistic as we can.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, there's some misses. There's definitely some misses early on. Now, hopefully, they could turn into some hits, or some okay, that was okay, that was serviceable. But right now, there's several misses within the defense. Carson with a 2 also saying, "Are we ready to call any of the Bulldogs busts?" I'm assuming the Philly Dogs, as well as we're referring to Bulldogs, but
Mm,
it's
Jordan
a
Davis,
little
I think we're ready to call Jordan Davis a bust. I mean,
officially.
listen, that doesn't mean Jordan Davis stinks. Doesn't mean he's not a starter in this league. But when you're drafted ahead of Kyle Hamilton at like 12 in the first round, you're supposed to be a great defensive tackle, and he's not a great defensive tackle. So I think you could call that a bust. Bust is a really strong word, though. Bust is like Jamarcus Russell never plays another down. Jordan Davis is not that, and so it's a little strong. But of course, out of that group, yes, Dean is playing, I think, a little bit better than Jordan Davis right now. And Jalen Carter needs to play better because again, he was drafted to be a superstar, not just a rotational, starter caliber DT in the NFL. But I don't know if
Mhm.
I'd call them crazy bust right now. D Luckett says this is not the time to bench any starters. I agree. I mean, I don't think they're going to bench any starters besides Vontae Maddox, and that's not really even a benching because they'll probably still use him in dime packages and put him out there when injuries were to happen. DeJean obviously is hopefully ready enough to earn that role. That's been what Vic Fangio's kind of hinted at, that it's going to take you know a couple of weeks, couple of months to get him up to speed. And so, hopefully he's up to speed now. But I do think, Josh, that overall, the vibes this week have got to be feeling pretty good if you're Philadelphia. The fact you get the Browns, and I'm praying that I don't eat my words here because if they lose, it's going to look terrible. But you are potentially getting one of the 2 worst teams in the NFL. The only other team
Mhm.
you'd rather play coming off a bye is Carolina right now, right? Out of the entire NFL. And you
Yeah,
might take the Browns because Carolina's offense at least has
I
a
think I
competent
would.
quarterback and a decent running game, which the Browns have neither. So they are being offered on a plate the opportunity to be 3-2 after a bye week with a healthy roster, and I think we would all take that to the bank.
Yes, and if they don't win, as Ryan here, appreciate the five, says, if the Browns win, burn the staff to the ground. The decision to
Oh,
cut
yeah.
White was idiotic. Can't understand it at all. Can't wait to see Brown on the field. That is correct. The Brown we really care about is AJ Brown, of course, and he
Of
will be
course.
on the field. So everyone hyped to see that. We will all be in the same boat, I'm sure, if that happens. If you lose to Cleveland, because I'm right there with you. I don't know who would, based off of, again, we talk about recency bias or looking at teams, but
Yeah.
Cleveland they're the worst team in the NFL. Like, they have the worst
Yeah.
quarterback in the NFL.
Statistically, for sure. For
The
sure.
worst QB rating. Deshaun Watson is either seeing ghost and or he's just running into sacks, and he's not throwing the ball down the field. I mean, heck, he's got the worst yards per attempt since like 1970. I think
Bad.
it's atrocious. It's historically bad. So you add all that on top of the fact that this team is not really going anywhere with any of sort of their weapons. Their defense is trying to hold things together, but there's only so much you can do when your offense can't move the ball down the field and is going to turn the ball over. So, yeah, I would absolutely sign up for that. If you want to have, we talked about it with the Bucks game. Say, hey, maybe this is one of those to have a catalyst, jumpstart your pass rush, your D line. Get some
Yeah.
pressures on everybody. This Cleveland game is more than that. Like, excuse me, this is a game where you should be able to get sacks. If you get up early, Deshaun Watson is going to run into sacks there. He's going to hold on to the ball too long. So
So
if we don't come away from this game with a win and some defensive presence, we're going to have definitely some serious concern. Philly Sports Wrap with a 10. Should Belichick or Kellen Moore coach this team? So we're not there yet, but I mean,
we're not there yet.
hypothetically.
And I think signing Belichick middle of the season is nuts. I would never want to do that. If you're going to sign any coach, you'd want them to have a full off season, get their guys. You wouldn't just thrust Belichick in there and say, hey, make the guys tackle better, right? It's not going to work. They would promote Kellen Moore or Vic Fangio, whichever one they like better. That would be the interim head coach for the rest of the year, and then they would evaluate on the free agent market in terms of head coaches. So that's Belichick midseason is definitely not happening. I don't care if they lose by 40 on Sunday, which they won't. But if they would, they fire Sirianni and they'll promote internally. Same thing the Jets did. Jeff Old Brick, Old Bright, their defensive coordinator,
Yep.
is now the interim guy, and that makes sense.
Yeah, totally agree. I couldn't see it within the regular season, but
Nope.
it does
Offseason,
feel like
sure.
it's realistic as a play. You're
Sure.
right, as a candidate for in the offseason, one that you would be going with. But all right, I think we're going to wrap it up here, obviously, with the news, kind of give a good recap for people that join and watch it back. Good read there. But again, just a refresher for those last second joining here, Devin White officially cut by the Eagles.
Gone.
See what they do here. Obviously, they're moving forward with Nakobe Dean and Zack Baun, but big game for Sirianni and really everybody to reset, get something going right, build some momentum. You've got one of the easiest schedules, or I guess the easiest schedule in NFL coming up. So we'll see. But another surprise, I guess, something odd with the defense. Vic Fangio has his ways. He has his ways of doing things. So hopefully we trust that it's good. But stay tuned. More videos to come. Appreciate you guys. Like and subscribe as always. For Thomas Mott, I'm Josh Davis. And you know what it is. Go Birds.
See you guys. Go Birds.